This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi. Parshas Chukas. Baruch Mabam to the Kollel Igor de Perka. We know the prominent feature of Parshas Chukas is the Parah Adumah, the red heifer, the red cow, the mysterious Parah Adumah. And we're going to discuss the concept of Parah Adumah this morning, but we're going to begin with a little bit of a different angle on it. We're going to put a little bit of a different spin on it. We're going to begin with the comment of the Magen Avram. Magen Avram, one of the great Noisei Kalim, wrote on Orach Chaim. And Magen Avram was a very poor man. He was so poor he cannot afford a simple pen or paper. So he wrote commentary Magen Avram on the walls of his house. Imagine, the Magen Avram was written on the walls of his house. So every word of the Magen Avram is very measured and concise. It's certainly not a history book, but in Siman Taf Kuf Pei, he feels it necessary to inform us. He writes, "V'isa b'ksavim." It's found in the writings. Now this is important to know. This is an oft-used expression of the Magen Avram, "V'isa b'ksavim." Which writing? Whose writing? So you have to look in the Chidah. Chidah writes in the Shem HaGdolim that when the Magen Avram says Ksavim, he refers to Kisvei HaArizal. Doesn't want to say exactly, but the Ksavim refer to Kisvei HaArizal. Says the Chidah in the Shem HaGdolim, She'aroi l'chol bar Yisrael lifgois al sreifas haTorah. Every Jew should cry for the burning of the Torah. Shemikayach zeh nimsura haTorah l'klipos. Because of this, the Torah was given over to the dark side. Hamakoim yachziro lanu. May the Rebbe Shem return it to us. B'mher of Yameinu, swiftly in our days. What is the Arizal referring to? What's he talking about? When was the Torah burned? So the Magen Avram quotes further. Kasav HaTanya. The Tanya writes. Now who's the Tanya? Not who you think it is. Not referring to the Baal HaTanya, because the Magen Avram preceded the Baal HaTanya. Well, to know who the Tanya is, you also have to look in the Chidah. And the Chidah also writes elsewhere in the Shem HaGdolim that whenever the Sefer Tanya, it's an early Sefer, one of the Rishonim, it's almost entirely taken from Shibalei Haleket. Okay? It's a Sefer of a Rishon, almost entirely from the Shibalei Haleket. And he says, B'yoim HaShishi, on Friday, Parshas Chukas, right? So a few days from now, 5 days from now, Noagu Yechidim L'Hesanois. Individuals have a custom to fast. Sheba oisei hayoim nisrafu, because on that day it was burnt. Chaf, kroinos, malayim, svarim, betzarfas. 20 wagon loads of ancient documents, books, Sifrei Kodesh in France. Now there are actually two different gersais of this episode, because if you look in the Shibalei Haleket, the Shibalei Haleket writes 24 wagon loads. Of course, those who know are familiar that this happened in the year 1242. In Kina Mem Aleph, which was written by the Maram Mi Rothenburg, he records this historical event in the 41st Kina. And on that day, 20 now, you have to understand, it wasn't like we have Svarim today. If 20 wagon loads of Svarim were burned today, it would be a terrible tragedy. Thousands of Svarim. But nevertheless, we have the original text. We have it on the computer. To print a Sefer today, it's like that. A Sefer prints immediately. In those days, this was before Daniel Bomberg. This is before the invention of the printing press. This is a manuscript that predates the printing press. It's called what? Incunabula. That's the official terminology. And this was, right? Incunabula.
Written by hand.
Handwritten documents before the printing press. And it's not like, okay, well, we'll just do it again. To write over Shas was like a lifetime achievement. And 20 or 24 wagon loads of manuscripts of Rishonim, of Shas, that means the original Gersais, the ancient Gersais, this was lost forever, and it was a terrible tragedy. So now here's the question. Question is, in Judaism, we never commemorate anything by the day of the week. Right? There's no Lahavdil, Elef Good Friday. There's no days of the week. Something Sunday. There's days of the month. Judaism is based on the moon, right? Rosh Hashanah is the first day of Tishrei. Yom Kippur is the 10th day of Tishrei. Sukkot is the 15th day of Tishrei. Chanukah is the 25th day of Kislev. There is nothing based on the day of the week. Why commemorate it on Friday, Erev Parshas Chukas? Isn't this right? Why Erev Shabbos Parshas Chukas? The answer is V'loi kavu oisai b'mei hachodesh. They did not enact it by the day of the month. Why? Because in those days the Chachamim, the Rishonim, they did something, and don't try this at home. They did something called She'elas Chaloim. They inquired via the heavens through a dream. It was told to them Sheyoim ha-Parsha goyreim, that it was not caused by the day of the month, it was caused by the day of the week. Something about this Parsha, Parshas Chukas, caused this perplexing catastrophe to happen. Why? Because they asked Ribbon Shalom, why is this happening? And they were told the following three-word response. Zois Chukas HaTorah. So they asked through the dream, they sent the message up, and they were told in a dream, Zois Chukas HaTorah, and the Targum on Zois Chukas HaTorah is, look at number 5, Da Gezerah Soiraisa. This is the decree of the Torah. If you want to know why is this happening, if you want to understand, it's just a decree. You can't understand it. It's a Gezerah min HaShamayim. Says the Magen Avram, Begam B'Shnas Tavches, in the year 408. What year is that? Okay, I can tell you a trick now. Anytime you see a Hebrew calendar date, you could automatically transfer into a secular date by adding 1240. 1240. So 408 is 1648. Yeah? Tach v'tat. 1648. Nechravu shnei kehilos gedolos ba'osei hayoim. Two great communities were destroyed, like we say in the slichos that were composed by the Sifsei Kohen, the Shach. So there's something unusual that even though every other day in Judaism is governed by the day of the month, but this tragedy is somehow connected to the Parsha. There's something about Zois Chukas HaTorah that contributed to this mysterious event happening. By the way, this is recorded number 2 in the Shiur Haleket as well. And lest you think, well, this is an Ashkenazic tragedy, but the Sfardim, they don't commiserate in our tzara. Well, look at number 3. Reb Chaim Falaji, one of the great Sephardic Oinim, he wrote Moyed L'chol Chai. He's the other Kaf HaChaim. He says, Uve'irenu Izmir, in our city Izmir. Where's Izmir? Turkey. Now here I remember, Mikat Havina Talia, when I was a kid, Kama Anoshim Soichrim She'nizharam Latzes Afilu L'Shuk L'Skeim Be'erev Shabbos Chukas. Working people did not leave the home Friday afternoon, Parshas Chukas. It was a devastating day. It was like going out into the street, during the holiday in Poland, on Easter Sunday, lahavdil, or to go out during the Mass, right? You're endangering your life. Well, in Turkey, you would not go out onto the street Erev Shabbos Parshas Chukas, and whatever Shabbos preparations they would have to do, they made sure to do it Thursday. Says Reb Chaim Falaji, V'hein oid hayoim rabim nisharm shalech me'ir l'kfar b'yom zeh. Nobody goes to travel to do business. Hashem yishmerenu. So this was a well-known day which was fraught with danger for the Jewish people. And as pointed out in number 6 by Reb Simcha Zisel Broida, Rosh Yeshiva of Hebron, former Rosh Yeshiva of Hebron, you see from here an amazing thing, how the Torah is really the architectural plans of events, that here we have a principle that the Parsha affects the happenings of the week. So in other words, when you see events happening during the week, you could always trace it back somewhere in the Parsha. Okay, so if let's say you're digging in your backyard this week and you find, water, it's because this week is the Be'er Shel Miriam, right? There's always something. Or let's say if you see a red cow walking down the street, they say the drink, Red Bull. You ever see that? Red Bull. So it's well known. The owner of Red Bull passed away. Shabbos Parshas Chukas. It's very.
You're joking.
I don't joke with you, right? Anyway, so it's a joke. It's a joke. Don't worry. Okay, but it's true. Okay, so whatever happens in the course of the week always could be traced back to the Parshas HaShavua, and this is a yesod that we see that somehow the Sreifas HaTorah and Sarfas is connected to the words Zois Chukas HaTorah, Da Gezeras Oiraisa. But on a deeper level, let's understand what do the decrees of the burning of the Svarim in France, what do they have to do with the red cow? They don't seem to have anything to do with the red cow, but somehow there is this inherent connection between the mitzvah of Parah Adumah and the burning of the 20 wagon loads of Svarim in France.
We answer why on Friday, I'm sorry.
Somehow Friday is already the preparation for the Parshas. Somehow it contributes to the but exactly what the connection between the red cow and the burning of the Svarim, that's something we'd like to investigate. So Rabbi said, let's talk a little bit about the Parah Adumah. Rashi, in the beginning of Parshas Chukas, discusses why the Parah Adumah is a chayk, and Rashi points out what about it is a chayk. A chayk is a statute, says Rashi. Lefi shahasatan v'umais ha'olam moinin es Yisrael. The Satan, the nations of the world, what does moinin mean? They insult, like oinoas dvarim. They insult Klal Yisrael. Lemar, ma ha-mitzvah hazois? What's this mitzvah? Uma tam yeshba. What's the reason for it? And what's the answer? Lefikach kasa b'chuka. Therefore, the Torah writes, statute, gezerahim alafanai. It's a decree. Ein lecha reshus leharach ra. You cannot question it. So we know the Parah Adumah is a mitzvah that has no apparent reason. Right? We're all familiar with that. It's a chayk. The nations of the world bother us, they challenge us, they mock us, and we tell them, look, God told us to do it, there's no reason. Which is putting us in a very difficult situation. Because we all know it says in Pirkei Avos, Da'ama lahashiv la'apikaris. You should know what to respond to the apikaris. You don't just say the apikaris says, why do you believe in the Torah? That's what Hashem said. And why do you do this mitzvah? That's what Hashem said. You're supposed to understand the reason and be able to explain it to the apikaris. You're not supposed to be mocked and be challenged. So why would the Rebbe Shem put us in this very uncomfortable situation where the Parah Adumah, well, why are you burning the red cow? And the answer is, I don't know, God told me to. But why would Hashem put us in that situation? He does want us to be able to explain our religion to the nations of the world. In fact, if you look in Parshas Va'aschanan, and this is in the second paragraph in number 11, in Parshas Va'aschanan, the Rebbe Shem tells Klal Yisrael, Re'ei limadati eschem chukim u'mishpatim bekerev haaretz u'shmartem asisem ki chachmaschem v'inaschem le'enei ha'amim. And the goyim are going to say, Rak am chacham v'novon hagoy hagadol hazeh. We know that the Rebbe Shem wants us to look good in the eyes of the nations. The Rebbe Shem, when the nations of the world look at us, Hashem wants them to say, wow, what intelligent people, what smart people. And the Gemara says this is specifically referring to the mitzvah of intercalation, figuring out the new moon, exactly how long the lunar cycle is. When the nations of the world see that the Jewish people have a tradition, that the lunar cycle is 29.51237, something that NASA had to spend millions of dollars to figure out, and we had it already for a few thousand years, so we look good in the eyes of the nations. The Rebbe Shem wants us to be held up to the nations of the world as the paragon of intelligence. So then why would he put us in the awkward situation that the nations of the world say, why are you burning this red cow? And we say, I don't know, that's what God told us to do.
So
Now even forget about the Matar. Whatever it is that's not understandable, why would Hashem put us in that situation?
If they would mock, they would say, what do you mean?
Yeah.
A whole road.
Exactly.
That would be the...
Exactly. How they mock us that the mitzvah doesn't make sense. And what's our answer? I don't know. That's the answer. That's what God said. But is that how the Rebbe Shem wants us to defend ourselves to nations of the world? Does it say in Pirkei Avos, Loi teida ma shetosh al apikaris? It says, Da ma shetosh al apikaris. Does the pasuk say in Va'aschanan, look like a shoite in the eyes of the goyim? It says, no. Rak chachmaschem uvinaschem le'enei ha'amim. Rak am chacham v'novoin hagoy hagadol hazeh. The Rebbe Shem wants us to look like an am chacham v'novoin. So if Hashem wants us to look like an intelligent people, why put us in the uncomfortable situation of defending a mitzvah that has no explanation? And not only that, even the wisest of all men, Shlomo HaMelech, did not know the reason for the Parah Adumah, right? We're all familiar. Look at number 8. Amar Shlomo, Al Kol Eila Amadati. I figured everything out. I understand tefillin. I understand why this one, the hand has has one parsha, and the head has 4 parshiyos, and I understand why their hair is sticking out, I understand why the straps are black, and I understand why the reason for Shabbos, and I understand the reason of Lulav and Esrog, but I can't crack the code of the red cow. Parshas shel Parah Adumah chakarti v'sha'alti ufishpashti. I investigated, I probed, I analyzed. Amarti echkama. Shlomo Melech says, I thought I would be wise, but it's beyond me. Why would Rivan Shem hide the reason of Parah Adumah even from Shlomo HaMelech? Is it that complicated? Is it really that complicated? But the good news is, the day will come that we'll all understand the reason for Parah Adumah. If you look at number 9, the Medrash says that first of all, Moshe Rabbeinu knew the reason for Parah Adumah. V'yichoi lecha Parah Adumah, Amar Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Chanina, Amar Lai Kadosh Baruch Hu, LeMoshe lecha ani megala tam Parah. I'll let you know the reason, aval la'acher chuka, but nobody else. But Amar Rav Huna, ki yekach moyer ani meisharim eshboit, says the Medrash, dvarim hamachusim mikem ba'olam hazeh, asidim liyos soifim la'olam haba. Don't worry, the day will come, you will understand the reason for the Parah Adumah. Now, if the day will come that we'll understand the reason for the Parah Adumah, that means there's a reason. That means something we could understand, something Moshe Rabbeinu understood. So if there's a reason for it, then why can't we know it now? And if it's beyond us, then how are we going to know it then? How do we explain this interesting phenomenon of history that right now we don't understand the reason for Parah Adumah, but the day will come that we will understand it? So, another interesting thing is, we're all familiar that Parsha Zachar is Dairaisa. Yeah? But the Shulchan Aruch brings down, and I'm going to tell you a trick today, and you're going to be grateful to me forever. Okay?
You already are.
Thank you. But this one, the Shulchan Aruch says in Siman Taf Reish Pei Hey. So I'm going to give you a trick. You'll sound like a big Talmud Chacham. You'll always remember that this halacha is in Taf Reish Pei Hey. Oisi Ois Parah. Okay? Taf Reish. By the way, I once went to a Shiur from Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, Rabbi Vadia's son. So he said in learning, you always have to come up with tricks to how to remember things. So he used to say, anybody here know what Siman Hilchos Dagim are in Yeridea? Now I learned Hilchos Dagim, I didn't remember what Siman it was in. So he said, what do you mean? Siman Pei Gimel. So I was like, how do you know that? He says, Pei Gimel, very simple, it's Rashi Teva, it's gefilte fish. Yeah, this is a Gadol B'Yisrael, one of the biggest Bekiyim in the world. He has Simanim, and he was saying very interesting Simanim, how he remembers different things. Whatever works. So, in Siman Taf Reish Pei Hey, the Shulchan Aruch brings down that there is a Yesh Sharmin that Parshas Zachar is Dairaisa, and guess what else? And Parshas Parah is also Dairaisa. Parshas Parah is Dairaisa. We don't even have a Parah Adumah. We don't care about Tamei Meis. I mean, there's no Inyan even. There's no, let's say Yisrael. Does anybody ever say, you know what, it's better not to go into the cemetery. You don't want to become Tamei Meis. There's no Inyan of a Yisrael not becoming Tamei Meis. So there's no Inyan of Tumas Meis. There's no Inyan of Parah Adumah. We don't have Parah Adumah, and we have to learn about it. Why would there be a mitzvah d'oraisa to learn about Parah Adumah? Now, everybody knows we learn Parshas Parah before Parshas HaChodesh. Why? Because in preparation for bringing the Korban Pesach. Very nice, but if you hadn't noticed, we haven't brought a Korban Pesach in quite a while. The Korban Pesach today, there's no mitzvah d'oraisa to bring Korban Pesach. So how in the world would Parshas Parah be a mitzvah saseh d'oraisa? Okay, so the Aruch HaShulchan says he found the drasha, which is very interesting because the Aruch HaShulchan is not an Amoira, but he says that he brings a drasha. 2 times in this week's Parsha it says Chukas Olam. One to teach that even when the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, you could still use the ashes of the Parah Adumah. In fact, the Gemara in Chagiga says, Chavraya haya medakon beGalila. So we see from there, the Kesef Mishnah says that the Amoraim still had the ashes of Parah Adumah even though there was no Beis HaMikdash. And that's darshan from the pasuk Chukas Olam. But why would it say again Chukas Olam? To teach that even though there's no Beis HaMikdash, there's still a mitzvah d'oraisa to learn about the Parah Adumah. and they ask on the Aruch HaShulchan, you can't darshan psukim unless you're an Amoira. It's very nice, there's an extra pasuk of Chukas Leilam, but the Gemara does not make this drush. And the Malbim of the Artz HaSachayim says a Mahalach, and the Meshech Chochmah says a Mahalach. But bottom line, why should there be a mitzvah d'oraisa to read about a mitzvah that's not noigea b'zman hazeh? Okay. So Rabbi say, these questions that we presented today primarily come from the Sefer Be'er Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Tzvi Salant, one of the great darshanim of the 20th century. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was very machshiv the Sefer Be'er Yosef. And he also wants to know, the Medrash says about Parah Adumah the following lashon: Chuka chakakti, gezerah gazarti. Chuka chakakti, I made a statute. Gezerah gazarti, I made a decree. What exactly is this referring to? Okay, so let's begin in the following way. What exactly is so mysterious about the Parah Adumah? I mean, what's so mysterious about it? Everybody knows Rashi. Rashi brings from his Rabbi who? Rav Moshe Hadash. The Rav Moshe Hadash says, I'll tell you the reason for Parah Adumah. Klal Yisrael had on their shoulders a big avera, the Chet HaEgel. The Egel is a young calf. Now, if you invite someone to your house, and the parents don't watch the kid, so what does the kid do? First thing he does is he pulls down the tablecloth, so the wine spills everywhere, and then the wax drips off the candles, and the kid makes a mess. But what are you going to do? You're going to patch the kid? Kid's 8 months old. So you tell the mother, your kid, clean up the mess. So says Rav Moshe Hadarshan, the Jews sinned with the Egel. The Egel is the baby calf. Let the mother come and wipe it up. That's the Parah. That's the Parah Adumah. And all the various pratim of the Parah Adumah correspond to the Chet HaEgel. For instance, they take 3 species, Eitz Eres, Ezav, Vishni Soilas, connected to 3,000 Jews that died at the Egel. And Rashi goes on to explain how every single detail of the Parah Adumah corresponds to the Chet HaEgel. So what exactly is so mysterious about the Chet HaEgel? What's mysterious is the paradoxical nature of the Parah Adumah. What's the paradoxical nature? That it's metaher es hatmeim umetame es hatahirim. Now what does that mean? There's a lot of misconception about that. The kohen who sprinkles the ashes of Parah Adumah does not become tamei. Does not become tamei. Doesn't become tamei. The person who gets the ashes sprinkled upon becomes tahar. So it's metaher the tameim. Someone who's tamei, he becomes tahar. The person sprinkling it also remains tahar. So what exactly is so mysterious about it? Well, let me explain. What's mysterious about it is, here you have a guy, he's tamei meis. Tamei meis is the most severe tumah. I don't care what mikvah you go to. You can go to mikvah in Muncie, you can go to mikvah in Williamsburg, you can go to mikvah in Borough Park, you can go in Flatbush. I don't care what, you could go to the mikvah of Arizal. If you're tamei meis, it doesn't work. You're just as tamei as before. You could go to a Belz mikvah, a Satmar mikvah, a Vishnitz mikvah. None of those mikvahs work. You need the ashes of the Parah Adumah. And yet the ashes of the Parah Adumah are able to accomplish that the person is tahar. But if anyone other than the sprinkler comes into contact with the ashes of the Parah Adumah, or someone who merely transports it, he becomes tamei. So it's such a source of tahara that it can be matara tamei meis, and yet anyone else who touches it becomes tamei. That is the paradox of the Parah Adumah. Now this paradox, that it could make someone who's impure pure, and make someone who's pure impure, it should remind you of a certain phenomenon in this world. It's not a regular phenomenon, it's not a common phenomenon, but it's something that exists. It's something that exists and is very troublesome to many people. It's something that really confuses many people, and something that bothers many people. And that is, look at number 12 from the Sefer Tzrar Hamor. Tzrar Hamor is Rabbi Avram Saba, one of the Gerushei Sfarad. And he says, V'cheinim Yisrael shoyel. The Jews ask, Ma tam yeshba? What's the reason for the Parah Adumah? Shemetaheres hatmeim umetama hatahirim. That it makes the impure pure. It makes the pure impure. Ein lahashiv. The only answer is Gezeras Melachi. It's a decree of the king. And you know what it's like? Pezehu ke'inyan tzadik v'raloi v'rasha v'toivloi. The Parah Adumah reminds us of a certain phenomenon that exists in this world, and that is sometimes you have a righteous person who does what the Rebbe Shem asks him, and the person has a hard life. And sometimes you see a wicked person who is mamish, not shomer Torah mitzvahs, and his life is smooth like butter. Why is this? This is known as the phenomenon of tzaddik v'raloi, rasha v'toivel. This is something that even Shlomo HaMelech cannot understand. In Koheles, in Parak Ches, Shlomo HaMelech says, Yesh Hevel, there is a certain insanity in this world. And that is, when you see a tzaddik, that it looks like God is treating them like a rasha. And you see a rasha, and it looks like Rebbe Shem is treating them like a tzaddik. Now, don't think this is the way the world works. It's not the way the world works. This is the exception to the rule. It's the exception to the rule. What's the rule? The rule is what David HaMelech says. David HaMelech says, Rak ve'einecha sabit v'shilumas r'shaim tireh. You open up your eyes, and you see people get what they deserve. Everybody knows, all you do, you don't have to listen to the radio, only if you want to waste your time. But if you hear the news, right? This guy, he's 30 years old, he died of drug overdose. This Hollywood star, he was knocked off. What, these are tzaddikim over here? I don't think so, right? The answer is, Rak ve'einecha sabit, v'shlumas v'sham tireh. You see what happens to the rasha. You see big tzaddikim, doesn't mean that they're rolling in the dough, but they live long, satisfying, fulfilling lives. Why? That's the general rule, but it's not always the rule, and nobody ever knows what's what. Nobody could ever say, oh, this guy, I understand why. Every situation is a mystery to everybody, because nobody knows what's doing by anybody else. But there exists this phenomenon, tzaddik v'raloi, rasha v'toivloi, which, if you want to know, is there any mitzvah which is symbolic of this phenomenon? Is there any commandment that the Rebbe Shem gave us that reminds us of this mystery of history? It's Parah Adumah. Parah Adumah is the mitzvah which is analogous to tzaddik v'raloi, rasha v'toivloi. It is metaher the tmim. You have a guy who's tameh. The guy, his body is full of spiritual contamination, and all of a sudden he touches the ashes of the Parah Adumah, and he's clean like a whistle. And you have another guy, he's walking around, he is pure like anything. He was Toivel Zayin in the Arizal's mikvah 54 times, gematria, I don't know what. And he touches the ashes of the Parah Adumah, and he's tameh. This is the exact replica and paradigm of tzaddik v'raloi, rasha v'toivloi. And nobody ever understood that phenomenon. Not Shlomo HaMelech, not Chavakuk, none of the Nevi'im, not David HaMelech. He can't understand. B'froyach Rishoim k'mo Yosef. He can't understand. David HaMelech says, Kinesi b'hoilulim, shalom Rishoim ereh. I don't understand the tranquility of the Rishoim. Even Elisha ben Avuya, one of the great Tanoim, what happened? He's walking down the street and he sees a tongue on the street. And he says, whose tongue is this? Whose tongue was it? Chutzpah HaMetorgaman. And Elisha ben Avuya said, Zu Torah v'zu schara. Talking about a Tana, Elisha ben Avuya. He's in Pirkei Avos. But even he could not make heads or tails, cannot wrap his mind around the idea that a pesh, a hefik, margolios, right? A tongue that only spoke words of Torah, this was its end. So this is one of the great mysteries of life. So Rebbe Shalom says, look, there's only one way to deal with it, and that is to prepare yourself. And I'm going to give you a mitzvah. And the name of the mitzvah is Parah Adumah. And this mitzvah is paradoxical. It's inexplicable. Nobody understands it. Not even Shlomo HaMelech. And exactly what's not understandable? How the same ashes could make something tameh, tahar, and yet it could make someone who's tahar, tameh. And this is a mitzvah that nobody understands. And what's the purpose of the mitzvah? The purpose of the mitzvah is so that you realize there are things that happen in this world that don't make sense. That to the Rebbeinu Shalom makes sense, but we can't understand them. By the way, it's not only talking about bad things. It's talking about good things also. Sometimes a good thing happens to a person. Don't think, oh, I understand why it happened, because I'm such a good guy. No, it's also a mystery. It's also, I don't know why. That was the cheshbon of the Rebbeinu Shalom. And it's not just saros, it's not just toivos. In a person's life, things happen to them, to their family, and they say, why did it happen this way? It doesn't make any sense. With my family, with my spouse, with my kids, the way it worked out. I thought life would go in this direction. I had it all planned out. Not good, not bad, but unpredictable. And the answer is, that's the way the world runs. It's a Parah Adumah. The world is a Parah Adumah. Things don't run the way you think they're going to run. You know, the Chavos HaVavos says that one of the main lessons of this world is, it's not ours. We don't run the show. As much as people think, I could predict my life, I'm going to do this now, and I'm going to go prepare myself for that now, and my career will be like this, and then I'll go there. People think they could predict their life. Why do people want to be able to predict their life? Because they want to feel like they're in control of their life. And if you feel, it puts the control of one's life in one's own hand. Chavos HaVavos says like this: the Rebbeinu Shalom does one of two things in this world. Either what you want to happen, the Rebbeinu Shalom does not make happen, just for one simple reason, so that a person realizes it's not their world, they're not in control. But says the Chavos HaVavos, even more than that. Sometimes the Rebbeinu Shalom makes what you want to happen, but not the way you thought it was going to happen. Meaning the outcome is the same, but it happens in a different way. Why? Just so you don't get too comfortable. Not that the Rebbeinu Shalom wants a person to be comfortable. You realize that you're just a visitor over here. You're just passing through. There's no control in this world. That's the concept of the mitzvah of Parah Adumah. It's a preparation for life. It's a life lesson. We find, look at number 15. The Gemara says, in Menachos, Daf Chavtes Amud Beis. The Gemara says that when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Shamayim, he saw the Rebbeinu Shalom sitting and tying crowns around the Yosef, making the tagim, making the different features on top of the letters. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, this is unbelievable, Hashem. You control everything. So Hashem said, no, it's not a big deal. You should know, in many, many generations, a person's going to come down, and he's going to darshan every single kites and every single every single nook and cranny of the letters. He's going to have thousands of halachas. And who is that? Moshe Rabbeinu said, let me show him to me. So the Rebbeinu Shalom said, look, you could go to the Shiur, but you can't sit in the front row. You have to sit in the 8th row. In those days where you sat, it meant something, right? So Moshe Rabbeinu had to go to the Shiur, but when the guard of the Beis Medrash said, look, Moshe, you're a newcomer here. I'm not sure how much you're going to chap over here. You sit all the way in the back. So Rabbi Kiva was the Maggid Shiur, and he was darshaning, and Moshe Rabbeinu had no idea what he was talking about. And when you go to a Shiur and you don't know what the man's talking about, you don't feel too good. You feel a little inadequate. I don't even know what he's saying. But then someone asked Rabbi Kiva a question, and Rabbi Kiva said, you know what? There's no answer to that. It's halacha l'Moshe misinai. Moshe Rabbeinu felt a little better, right? Okay. And then Moshe said, a man like this, why don't you give the Torah through him? I mean, he's much greater than me. And Hashem said, no, kach Allah b'machshava. That's my desire. That's what I want. Don't tell me who should give the Torah. I want you to give the Torah. Don't tell me what to do. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, show me what kind of schar this person's going to get. Someone who knows more Torah than me. So Hashem showed him that Hashem opened up the screen, pressed play, and all of a sudden Moshe Rabbeinu sees the grotesque death of Rabbi Kiva. They're raking his skin with iron combs. Moshe Rabbeinu said, Zu Torah v'zu schara. This is the reward. Hashem said, keep your mouth closed. This is what I decided. Don't tell me what to do. Very interesting that as an introduction to the Rebbeinu Shalom showing Moshe Rabbeinu the terrible death of Rabbi Akiva, Hashem allowed Moshe Rabbeinu to see them asking Rabbi Akiva a question, and the answer was halacha l'Moshe misinai. What was the purpose of that? Just to give Moshe a little boost? Moshe Rabbeinu, don't feel so bad. They're going to invoke your name. Says the Bar Yosef, very simple. What allows a person in this world to deal with the paradoxes of life, to the mysteries of life? What does a person have? What does Rebbeinu Shem give a person in their wherewithal? What does Rebbeinu Shem give us in our arsenal to be able to deal with those things in life that are mysterious? You know what the answer is? Halacha l'Moshe miSinai. There are certain mitzvahs that we don't know the reason for, we don't understand, they don't make sense to us, we just do them. Why? To prepare us, to train us that not everything in life we're going to understand. There are certain things that are beyond us, whether it's good things, whether it's bad things, or just in general, the way life turns and winds, we don't understand what the cheshbonos of the Rebbeinu Shem are. And the Rebbeinu Shem was preparing Moshe Rabbeinu. I'm going to show you in a few minutes what will happen to Rabbi Akiva. But let me at least prepare you. And the preparation is halacha l'Moshe miSinai. There's certain things, there's certain mitzvahs, there's certain commandments, there's certain chukim that we just don't understand the reason for. The Gemara in Yuma says that there's a machlokes Tanoim. In the future, who has to perform the service of the Adumah? Is it the Kohen Gadol, or is it even the Kohen Hadyot? But everybody agrees the Kohen Gadol could do it, except for the first Adumah. The first Adumah, Aaron HaKohen was not allowed to be involved with the Adumah. V'nosata oisa Elazar HaKohen. Why would Aaron HaKohen not be involved in the first Adumah? After all, the Kohen Gadol could always do the Adumah. If anything, there's an opinion any Kohen could do the Adumah, and yet the only person ever disqualified from a Adumah was the greatest Kohen of all time. Why should that be? Well, says Bar Yosef, very simple. If the purpose of the mitzvah of Adumah is to train a person, that when things happen in this world, a person has to say, you know what? I don't understand everything. The Rebbeinu Shem runs the show, and from his vantage point in Shemayim, he has a very good reason, which maybe one day I'll know what it is. If that's the reason for Adumah, then guess what? Aaron HaKohen did not need the Adumah, because Aaron HaKohen had already maxed out on this lesson. Is there anyone in history, everybody knows, on the 8th day of the Miluim, when the fire came down in Hashamayim and consumed Aaron's sons, Nadav v'Avihu, what does the pasuk say? Vayidaim Aaron was silent. And Rashi says, he wasn't just silent that he didn't have any tightness on the Rebbeinu Shem. His heart was silent. His heart didn't question. He was mekabel, the gezeros min hashemayim, with complete stillness. He had no questions. That means Aaron HaKohen already reached the summit of the heights of this midah, of being mekabel, the gezeros of Shamayim. So Rebbeinu Shem says, Aaron, you don't need this one. This one, you're good. You're good with this mitzvah, with this inyan, you've already passed. Give it to your kid. But this is an inyan, this is a lima, this is a lesson. You've already demonstrated that you have accomplished. And therefore, says the Be'er Yosef, this is the meaning of the language of the Medrash. Chuka chakakti, gezerah gazarti. You know what allows a person to be makabel, the gezeros min hashamayim? The chukim of the Torah. Chuka chakakti. You know why Hashem gives chukim? You know why the Rebbeinu Shem gives us mitzvahs? That we do them. Why? Because Hashem said so. Because that is the preparation for the events of life. Life in many ways is a journey of mystery. It's a mysterious journey. We don't understand many things. Many things are paradoxical. Many things are not explicable to our minds. But the Rebbeinu Shem has prepared us. Every year, says the Bar Yosef, you know why there's a mitzvah saseh d'oraisa to learn Parshas Parah? Because even though we don't have the actual Parah Adumah b'zman hazeh, life has not become any clearer since the Beis Hamikdash has been destroyed. We don't have an actual Parah Adumah, but the lesson of the Parah Adumah is as important as it ever was. It's a preparation, it's an idea, it's a yesod, it's a hashkafa that every Jew needs to internalize, that we don't understand everything that happens in this world. And the same way there are mitzvahs that were makabel, there are events that were makabel as well. Says the Bar Yosef, beautiful thing. Says Bar Yosef, Parak Kuf Yotes. This is Bar Yosef number 16, final page, Ois Vav. David HaMelech said in Tehillim, Zemirais hayu li chukecha. Your statutes are like songs to me. Beveis megurai, in my house of sojourning. Says the Sifri. See on page 4? Ois Vav, top right hand sign. Says the Sifri. David HaMelech is not just saying, I enjoy the chukim when life is simple. David HaMelech is saying, Beveis megurai, in my sojourning. Chazal Darshan. B'ma'aros, when David was hiding in the caves. B'metzudas, when he was hiding in the forts. B'varchem in Neshal b'ma'ara. Says the Gemara in Soita, when David was running away from his enemies, you know what he said? Zemirais hayu li chukecha. The only thing that gave me clarity, the only thing that gives me sanity, the only thing that gives me a certain ability to cope and deal with what happens in this world are not the mishpatim, not the eidos, the chukim. Why? Says Bar Yosef, according to what we've explained, it's very clear. When David had things going on in his life that he didn't understand, what allowed him to conquer the challenge was a concept that the Rebbe Shem has given us mitzvahs that we don't understand. And we perform them loyally, wholeheartedly, b'tmimos, without questions. We're makabel the mitzvah, and we train our minds. Like the Rambam says, the more a person does something, the more of a effect it has on a person, right? The Rambam says, you have two people. One guy has $100, one guy has 100 singles. One guy gives $100 to tzedakah, the other guy gives 100 singles. The guy who gave 100 singles, he'll be a greater person, because every time you repeat the act, it has an effect on you. Just one time you had a big inspiration to give, it's the repetition that affects the person's personality. Says the Bar Yosef, it's so beautiful. It's no wonder then that the mitzvah of Parah Adumah is specifically associated with death. Right? Hashem could have given us many, many chukim. But Hashem understands that at a time of Misa, a time when a person's facing Nevach, Lo Yaleinu, a tragedy, and they're facing these type of questions, and they're trying to come to grips with Tumas Meis, can't understand, why is this happening? It's hard to make heads and tails. What does the Rebbe Shalom want? So the Rebbe Shalom at that critical juncture of time gives the mitzvah of Parah Adumah to allow a person to train their mind to understand there are things in this world that are beyond us, that we can't wrap our minds around. But says the Bar Yosef, beautiful, the whole concept of Parah Adumah only needs to be an enigma to us nowadays. Why? Because nowadays the Gemara says that when good things happen, what bracha do you make? Hatov v'hametiv. And lo yaleinu, if tragedy strikes, dayon ha'emes. But la'asid lavai, bayoim hahu yiyah Hashem echad, u'shmai echad. So the Gemara asks, what now? Hashem's name is not one. So the Gemara says, no, la'asid lavai. No matter what happens, you're going to make hatov v'hametiv, because there will be no questions. There will be no tragedy. There will be no tzara. Everything will be clear l'taiva. Everything will be hatov v'hametiv. Says the Bar Yosef, it's only now, in this very confusing existence, the Rebbe Shalom needs to train us to deal with those things in life that are perplexing, those things that are self-contradictory, those things that are paradoxical. Only now in this world, in Olam Hazeh, do we need the preparation of the Parah Adumah. Do we need a mitzvah that we don't understand? But la'aseh lavai, when there's no tragedy, when everything is l'taiva, then the Marsham says, no problem. I'll tell you the reason for Parah Adumah. You don't need the training anymore. You don't need this preparation to deal with the questions in life. And this is the inyan, and this is the importance of the chayk, of the Parah Adumah. And even though many, many mitzvahs Rebbe Shalom has explained to us, but it is critical that a person has the exercise in being mekabel, the gzeros min hashamayim. We should all be zoichet to the great day. When everything will be hatov v'hametiv, and then we'll all understand the reason of the Parah Adumah. Have a great day. Shkaya.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.